In the last unit, we had a look at the quasm and asm structure. When we use those structures to form questions, we form direct question forms. So, in this unit, we're going to have a look at indirect question forms. Why would we use an indirect question form? Well, indirect question forms are a politer way of asking someone to do something. Saying where is, or what is, or why have can be seen as being a bit too direct and therefore could be interpreted as being rude. It may not be appropriate when providing a service or when acting on someone's behalf to use such direct forms. An old adage about British people is, if you tell a Brit to do something, they won't do it. But if you give a Brit a choice, they'll help you every time. Indirect question forms should be seen in that light, a politer way of requesting something which in effect gives the other person a choice. There are a number of indirect question openings. Could you, can you, would you, might you, do you happen to know if, I was wondering if, and so on. Some are more suited to spoken language and some to written language. For example, do you have any idea if is fine if you say it because the intonation of the voice is clear and friendly. But the same phrase could be badly misinterpreted by the reader if you write it. We won't go into any great detail about indirect forms in this video, but to find out more about indirect forms, please click on the links in the video description. Getting back to indirect question forms, what you've got to remember is that indirect question forms are different to direct question forms in 3 ways. To find out what these are, take a few moments to reword the direct question form into an indirect question form, starting with, could you tell me? For example, the direct question, how much are the apples, would be, could you tell me how much the apples are? Your answers should look like this. Let's go through the 3 rules. 1. The subject and auxiliary verb order changes. If we have a look at the first 2 sentences, we can see the following. Has the partner becomes the partner has the real estate conference becomes the real estate conference has. 2. The auxiliary verb do disappears. Why did the partner refuse becomes why the partner refused. However, the disappearance of the auxiliary verb is not a general rule, as the verbs be and have do not disappear. Consider these examples. Who has the partner met with becomes, could you tell me who the partner has met with? What is the partner doing becomes, could you tell me what the partner is doing? And lastly, 3, if the question is a yes-no question, we need to introduce if. Has the real estate conference already taken place becomes, could you tell me if the real estate conference has already taken place? Easy peasy. If you remember those 3 rules, you won't have any problems with indirect question forms. If I take you back to the last unit, we briefly looked at the word order for subject questions. Indirect questions use the same word order. Let's consider the following sentence. The 8:55 p.m. plane took off late because the pilot was taken ill. The direct subject question form is, which plane took off late? The indirect subject question form is, could you tell me which plane took off late? The word order is exactly the same. Just to quickly recap the quasm form we looked at in the last unit, and for sake of comparison, the direct object question would be, why did the 8:55 p.m. plane take off late? And the indirect object question form would be, could you tell me why the 8:55 p.m. plane took off late? Please note, as we discussed a few seconds ago, the auxiliary verb disappears in the indirect question form. To recap, to form an indirect question, you need to use an appropriate indirect opening. Could you, can you, would you, might you, do you happen to know if, I was wondering if, and so on. You need to change the word order of the auxiliary verb and subject as compared to a direct question. And if the auxiliary verb do is used in a direct question form, you need to drop it in the indirect question form. If you want a yes-no answer, you have to use if in the indirect question form. Okay. Trying to remember all of those rules, what I'd like you to do now is to have a look at the questions below. If you want to find out any more information about the things that we've looked at in this video, then please have a look at the links in the video description.